Just checking if the stream works. It should work in just a few minutes, hopefully. It says it's starting. Hello and welcome to everybody at this How to Code Well live stream. I do hope you're well. I do hope that you've had a good or having a good week as it's Wednesday. For anyone new here, my name is Peter Fisher. I'm a freelance web and mobile applications developer. Obviously the host of this How to Code Well YouTube channel where I teach code and I talk about programming, I talk about web development, and I talk about freelance stuff. Usually what happens on a Wednesday is I talk about what I've been getting up to on a weekly basis. So as a freelance developer, what I've been doing on that particular week. Because it's a Wednesday, it's obviously midweek, so it's kind of like last week, back end of last week, up to now has been extremely busy, but just bear with me a mo whilst I double check a couple of things. Page, I think this is working fine. Good. Yes. So this week it's been an interesting one because I've been doing a lot of DevOps-y type stuff. Yes, I am a coder, but there is a lot of stuff I do DevOps related. And it's weird because I was speaking to another freelancer a few weeks ago, and he was saying that he's a front end developer, very specialized in what he does, and he sees projects like conveyor belts, right? So he'll do a project and then the next project will come in, but he won't see that project to the end result. He'll just pass that on to another developer, right? To do all the back end stuff, to do all the DevOpsy stuff, which means that he has the ability to be very specialized, very sort of focused on what he is doing. And that to me sounded extremely comfortable, right? Because you have no desires to learn other bits and pieces because that isn't what you're specialized in. Yes. So, but the thing is, with me, it's difficult to have that kind of single-minded mindset because I kind of like to see the project go all the way through its motions to deployment, and I would like to be a part of that. Maybe it's a control issue that I have, I don't know, but it's a very different way of looking at a project. And so I'm not saying one way is the best way. What he was telling me is that he was able to go and look at a project in a very front-end way and not have too many concerns on how that's going to be deployed, how that's going to be managed, how that's going to be maintained, how the back end is going to fit, which meant that he could focus very narrowly on, microscopically onto how the front end works and performs and so forth, which was very interesting to me because he was coming out with things that I had never heard of and I was coming out with things that he had never heard of, and it was a very interesting conversation. But for me right now, I've been doing all sorts of things, and it is like spinning a lot of plates, right? So you've got the front end to work with, you've got the back end to work with, the whole DevOpsy thing, how it's going to be deployed. I've been doing a lot of stuff on AWS right now. Right at the moment, it's mostly been AWS type stuff, which I've been doing AWS for a long time, and it's kind of one of those things that once you configure it, you can kind of set and forget it, and it's kind of there. And yes, you do have to monitor it and look after it and so forth. But once you've configured all of those things, it is pretty much ready to go. And recently I've been doing all sorts of things with perhaps S3 and CloudWatch and all of that jazz. So I've been setting things up from scratch again and then kind of relearning all the things that I had done previously, because once, like I said, they're all configured, it's all good and fun. I'm just gonna check the chat. Hello everyone. Hello Jasis. Hello CyberZ1983. What a name. I've been asked by Jayesh Can you please make a video about socket programming in Java? Ooh. Yes, I know Java. I was taught at university, but it's not really my language to focus on. I'll put it in the backlog of ideas to look at. I'll put it on my Trello board for this channel. It isn't something I haven't done any Java on this channel because I don't do Java on a daily day-to-day basis. I did Java when I was at university, and I did Java when I was working on an Android application many moons ago. But I haven't done anything immediately on Java, but I'll put it in the backlog. It might be something that I do later on, but it's one of those things. It's kind of like I will do the tutorials that I'm kind of most focused on at the moment because they are the things that I work on day in to day out. So I've been doing a lot of Python stuff because I've been doing a lot of Python work. I've been doing a lot of PHP stuff because I've been doing a lot of PHP work, and just sort of flipping this on its head a little bit and talking about the AWS stuff. I'm actually thinking of doing a tutorial course series thing on AWS in S3. If you're interested in that, let me know, because like I said, I had to relearn bits and pieces myself in order to get the AWS command line working with the S3 stuff. So I think it would be beneficial to do a course on that, perhaps. But I'll be interested to hear what you guys think. Thank you, Jayesh, for saying that my videos were very, very helpful, and the software engineering principles. That is another topic that I would like to talk about later on in the future, is principles of software engineering. I know that I've mentioned some principles beforehand. It's a passion of mine to talk about software development in its sort of generic principle type state, and also compare that to other industries and so forth, and talk about their principles and where they align with us, as well as talking about the future of this industry, the things that us software developers have to cope with and deal with and adapt to, with all the changes in technologies and social behaviors and so forth. Lots of ethical, lots of moral questions and stuff that I wouldn't mind digging into later on, perhaps this year. But yeah, that's something that is very interesting. And hello to Cybers 1983. Hello. I hope you're all well. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of DevOps stuff. I've been doing a lot of configuration stuff. I've been doing a lot of sort of like legwork, which as a freelance developer, it's kind of one of these things that you just don't you can't really have something to show the user, because you are literally configuring this stuff in the cloud, and that and so there really isn't much to show as an end result to that, apart from obviously, yes, the images are now serving from another place and all of this stuff. But there is an awful lot of things that us developers have to sort of embrace and take on and take ownership of, that the clients just won't and don't need to have any kind of care about. So, for example, an issue that has just sort of cropped up is, what do we do with CSS, and what do we do with the images that are in that CSS? So here I'm talking about image sprites. So an image sprite would be a single image that has perhaps multiple images within it, and then you would use background positioning in CSS to sort of pick out the particular icon that you're after. But if that is in CSS, how are you going to update the URL to go to a particular bucket, an S3 bucket? And how are you going to cope with that in, say, development, staging, and production? Because obviously you need to change those on the fly, and therefore there is a little bit of work needed for things like Webpack and NPM to actually configure all of that stuff when you're actually minifying the JavaScript, when you're and the CSS and tidying all that stuff up. And all of this legwork, if you will, is not something that is very obvious and very sort of visual to the client, to the customer, to the person that you're dealing with, because they will just see the image and they'll be like, oh yeah, it's an image, and they'll associate that image to just dragging and dropping an image on their file system. But obviously it's so much more in depth to that, because we have to think about security, we have to think about the storage facilities, logging, monitoring, and all of that jazz when it comes to assets on the internet. So I've just been asked by CyberZ1983, what about the e-commerce system, how it works? What about an e-commerce system, how it works? How do you mean? I've done e-commerce systems before. What particular things are you after? I'll be interested to know, because e-commerce itself is a huge area of discussion. I've just mentioned security, logging, and monitoring, and Cyber here has just said payments. That is obviously another interesting thing, because without payments, it's not an e-commerce site. So personally, what I like doing on the payment thing is I like to give, I like to use perhaps a black box of tools that have been tried and tested and used. I would never myself write a credit card system. I would always use someone else's, just for the fear that I would screw it up. So here I'm talking about PayPal, I'm talking about Stripe, I'm talking about WorldPay. I've used other things. I've used SagePay, MousyCommerce, all of that jazz. And what I've been doing is basically creating adapters to allow for multiple payment gateways to be used on purchasing. The thing is, when you're creating a website, you want to give the customer the opportunity to choose what payment strategy best suits them. Not always do I have funds in PayPal. Not always do I have the right funds in say my bank account. So I want to be able to alter and choose what I want to use. So I would love to do a series talking about payment gateways and actually demonstrating how to integrate those payment gateways in. So perhaps this is something that we'll focus on later in the year. I'll definitely put that up as on a Trello item for the backlog of things to go through and talk about and demonstrate in a tutorial form payment gateways and how we can use payment gateways and all the concerns, security concerns about using payment gateways, HTTPS, for example, all of that stuff, and what you should do and what you shouldn't do in terms of perhaps GDPR, which is the regulation that's just come into effect on what data you need to store and what data you shouldn't be storing, and so on and so forth. So I've just been asked by JS, can we kill a particular task on a remote computer in Windows OS? So I'm not a Windows developer. Last time I touched a Windows box was I don't know, 5 years ago, and so I wouldn't know how to do that from a Windows box, but I certainly know how to do that from a Linux box. So you would tunnel in and then chain, you would terminate a process. But with a Windows box, I'm guessing you would use RDP, which is the Remote Desktop Protocol, because you would then access that in a GUI type form. However, you will need to configure the client and the host to allow access for that. Actually, tell a lie, I have been playing around with some Windows boxes, but not mine. So these are like people, clients abroad that will allow me to go through and access their stuff through RDP. I haven't done anything about turning things on and off. I've just done things like, altering configuration here and there. But Windows really isn't my forte. unfortunately. Well, I say unfortunately, I'm quite happy with my Linux sort of ecosystem that I've got here, but it's one of those things that it's one of these challenges that I think that a lot of people will have. So perhaps check out Stack Overflow and ask on that as well. Just going to grab some tea whilst it is still warm. Bear with me. No problems, Jayesh. That's fine. So yes, DevOps, AWS stuff. I've also been doing some configuration and alterations on the actual howtocodewell.net website. So I've put up a /live page, so you can actually watch this live on the howtocodewell.net website now. Hopefully, if I refresh the page, it should up. I think it is, which is good. You may have to wait for it to buffer or something, but that's now working. And what I would like to do is have previous live streams on that page as well, so you can access previous content. I'm slowly developing this website. It's kind of where I want to put a lot of my tutorials. However, I understand that there isn't many tutorials on there at the moment, but it will come in time. It will come in time. This week yesterday I published a Python control structures tutorial, and that was all about how to loop over dictionaries, bearing in mind that a dictionary is like it sounds. It's a textual based, dare I say, array. It's the key is a text and the value is whatever. So looping through it is very different from just looping through a normal, say, tuple or list in Python. So that went out yesterday. I've got a link in the show notes for that. Also, something that went live recently is I did a talk at PHP South West all about software complexities. The talk's about 32 minutes long, but it talks about software complexities from both the client's point of view and also a developer's point of view, and how we can simplify software development in general in the actual development of software, and also some of the areas that make it overly complicated, in my opinion. So I've got links in the show notes to that too. Other links in there as well. I've been asked frequently about hosting with AWS, being that I'm doing a lot of AWS stuff at the moment. One place I would recommend is Cloudways. They have a very good AWS hosting platform. If not Cloudways, AWS itself, and go complete native. But if you want to have that sort of level of someone else perhaps managing it, then Cloudways is good. Other things, I've got links in there to DigitalOcean and Linode, because I often get asked about other places to host bits and pieces too. It's just general links to programming resources and books. So do check those out. They're in the show notes as well. So Friday we've got another video going out. I'm not going to talk too much about that because I need to configure it and change it and edit it, because I did notice a couple of issues with it. So I want to change that. But that's going out on Friday. So do subscribe if you haven't done so already. And it's just a talk. It's a talk about software development. So if you're interested in that, then do subscribe. Do follow that along. If you haven't done so already, do subscribe as well to to Twitter and also to Instagram, because that's where I put like images of sort of like the backstage stuff, what I get up to sort of on a daily basis, that kind of bits and pieces. But this week has been extremely productive, but in a very bitty kind of way, because it's sort of like moving a project from just a normal hosting platform to AWS. And so there has been a lot of sort of like moving of parts that perhaps existed before but now are in other areas. So, for example, with the S3 stuff, it's all about policies. So, creating bucket policies, creating cross-origin resourceness, and basically trying to lock certain things down to specific users in terms of uploading. But if you're interested in AWS, if you're certainly interested in the S3 command line stuff, then I will do a course on that, because it is extremely useful. It's an extremely useful tool for uploading assets and stuff from your local machine to an S3 bucket. And you can also write scripts which will synchronize assets from one host to the S3 bucket and vice versa. And you can create backups and all sorts of interesting stuff. So yeah, that's basically what I've been doing. That plus the coding and all the other bits and pieces. And in my sort of spare time, I've been sort of updating the How to Code Well.net website to try and bring it up to speed. And I've also been playing with Symfony 4.1. That is, in my opinion, an extremely good set of updates to the Symfony framework, which is the PHP framework, because that they have moved perhaps the configuration in places that just make sense. Things are starting to make more sense. They made sense before, but this is making more sense, if that makes sense. It's kind of like so an example is the configuration is now split out into packages. All right, so with Composer, you would install packages, and now you can configure those packages on a package by package basis within their own YAML stuff. I've also started working with more on annotations as a way of configuring things, and this is an interesting part, because I was dead against mixing configuration with code. I thought that that was a massive mistake and that people should just not do that. However, it is far more efficient as a developer to actually do all that stuff and have perhaps the model both configured and created in the same place, or developed in the same place. So you would have perhaps your entities, and then you would have on top of each of your properties within the entity file in Symfony, you would have how that is created in the schema, what is the mapping representation of that property right there in the code. And it makes it a little bit more seamless, I think. And I was totally dead against this. I thought that configuration needs to be highly decoupled from the actual code. And I still think about that slightly, but less so. I'm not like a purist in that sense. I actually find that being able to read the property as a code and also being able to read the configuration as an annotation is also very useful. And as a way of documenting that code as well, that's very useful too. So I've been doing a bit of that. Which means that the YAML scripts are getting less and less, which is always a good thing, because YAML is just has all sorts of issues, especially if you forget to do perhaps put in a space where it should have a space, and you get a YAML parse error, and you're not too sure where that parse error is in your 300-line YAML file. So yes, anything that simplifies that whole process. And also with the doctrine migrations, you can literally change the property and then run the doctrine migrations diff to do a difference between what it knows and what you've done. And then you can do that, creates a migrations file, and then you can do a doctrine migrations migrate, doctrine migrations migrate, and that will do the actual migration of the web server. So there's no need to having to go and say, right, I've just created a new property on my model file. Now I need to actually access the mapping file and change that and tweak that, because doing it that way, you've got two areas that could go completely wrong, right? You could forget that you could have a typo in one and not in the other. But by having it all in one file, it just makes life a little easier. So I am starting to prefer that way of doing things, configuring things as well. Other things that I'm going to be doing, either today or tomorrow, I'm going to be working on some Lambda stuff. I'm going to be working on some SQS stuff as well, which is awesome. I feel like one of these sort of you remember like one of these images of like a telephone operator, and what I'm doing is I'm unplugging something and I'm plugging it into another place, and then I'm making sure that the connection is correct, that kind of thing. But yeah, listen, I am going to shoot off because I need to get my lunch. This is obviously a lunchtime live stream. We've done 25 minutes already. I'm out tonight. That's why I'm not doing it later on this evening. But thanks ever so much for anyone and everyone who's been part of this stream. You've been great. I will definitely put those comments and those suggestions, the Java from Jayish and the e-commerce from CyberZ1983 in my Trello board as things to do later on for tutorials and that kind of thing. And if I can think of a tutorial that I can use e-commerce with and the payment side of that, then I'll definitely do that too. Thanks ever so much for watching, guys. Happy coding. And I will see you again next week. Cheers. Bye.